They thought I was a nobody, a shadow in thrift store cardigans, hunched over a chipped desk by the copier, eating tuna salad from a crumpled paper bag. They saw what I let them see, a quiet woman with mousy hair and a cheap watch, blending into the hum of fluorescent lights and corporate chatter. If they'd looked closer, they might have caught the way I didn't flinch when the CEO barked orders across the bullpen, or how my hands stayed steady when department heads tried to steamroll me with their Ivy League egos. But they didn't look. Nobody ever suspects the woman eating alone at her desk to own the damn building she's sitting in. My name is Isabel Green, and 3 years ago, I inherited the keys to Summit Edge Ventures, a Chicago investment firm that could make or break fortunes with a single phone call. 62% of the shares dropped into my lap when my father's heart gave out. Not that anyone in the company knew, not the board, not the analysts, not even my husband, Andrew Green, the Golden Boy CEO the world worshipped as the brains behind our empire. I could have stormed into the top floor office the day after Dad's funeral, claimed my throne, and watched the room bow, but I didn't. I'd seen what power does, how it twists good people into snakes, how it turns ambition into cruelty, how it makes boardrooms feel like gladiator pits. Summit Edge was my father's dream, built on guts and integrity, not backstabbing and bonuses. I needed to know if it still had a pulse. So I slipped into the analyst pool under the alias Isabel Martin, a nobody with a fake resume and a thrift store wardrobe. My mission? Learn the company from the ground up. Watch, listen. Feel its heartbeat, or lack thereof. Nobody suspected a thing. I was the ghost in the corner, invisible as I refilled the coffee machine or fixed jammed printers. I sat through meetings where executives slaughtered ideas that could have saved us millions, their egos too bloated to notice the rot creeping into the company's bones. I watched Andrew strut through the office, all charm and cufflinks, nodding sagely as others pitched projects I'd quietly slipped into the pipeline under fake names. I took notes in a spiral-bound notebook, the kind you buy at Walgreens for $1. I stayed silent, I worked, and I waited. Then came Kendra Hawthorne. Kendra was the operations director, a woman so sharp she could cut glass with a glance. Her suits were tailored to kill, her heels clicked like a metronome, and her insults landed with surgical precision. She took one look at me, my scuffed flats, my generic blouses, and decided I was beneath her. Every time she passed my desk, her contempt hit me like a cloud of overpriced perfume. Once, she caught me eating a granola bar at my workstation and raised an eyebrow like I'd spat on her Louboutins. "This isn't a picnic, Isabel," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I just nodded, crumbs on my chin, and went back to my spreadsheet. She had no idea I was crafting the Horizon Initiative, a plan that would either save Summit Edge or burn it to the ground. The Horizon Initiative was my answer to the company's decay. It was a radical restructuring, slash the bloated budgets, fire the corrupt middle managers, and rebuild a culture that rewarded ideas over ass-kissing. I spent nights in my tiny Lakeview apartment, hunched over my laptop, building models that could turn our sinking ship around. I submitted it under a generic team name, Project Delta, to keep my fingerprints off it. The board ate it up, approved it for review, and scheduled a full presentation. Nobody knew the quiet analyst by the copier had written every word. That same week, I saw Andrew in the hallway, laughing with Kendra about a dinner reservation at Alinea, Chicago's holy grail of dining. He didn't even glance at me as he passed, his arm brushing hers like they were already sharing secrets. My stomach twisted, but not with jealousy. I'd stopped loving Andrew years ago when I realized his charisma was just a mask for cowardice. What stung was the betrayal, not of our marriage, but of the company my father built. I went back to my desk, opened my notebook, and added their names to a list I'd been keeping. The turning point came on a Thursday, rain hammering the windows like it wanted to drown the city. I'd just finished a revised financial model for Horizon when Kendra stormed into the analyst bullpen, her face tight with purpose. She slapped a pink folder onto my desk. "The board needs updated projections by end of day," she said, her tone daring me to crack. "Don't screw it up, Isabel." It was a test, one designed to bury me. The numbers were a mess, deliberately tangled, I later learned, to make me fail. But I didn't blink. I nodded, opened the folder, and got to work. As I sifted through the data, my phone buzzed. A text from Victoria Tran, my lawyer and the only person who knew my real identity. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Horizon's on the table. Proceed?" I typed back. "Not yet. 2 weeks. Let them hang themselves." That afternoon, Andrew called an all-hands meeting. The conference room was packed, the air thick with coffee breath and nervous energy. Kendra stood at his side, her arms crossed, a queen surveying her court. Andrew paced, his voice booming about breaches of trust and security failures. Then he stopped, looked straight at me, and said my name. "Isabel Martin." Every head turned. My heart didn't race, it froze. He accused me of accessing restricted files tied to Horizon, tampering with data, leaking internal memos, compromising the company's future. Each word was a blade, sharp and deliberate. Two security guards appeared at the door, their radios crackling. I stood, my chair scraping the floor. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. Andrew's eyes met mine. "There's no room here for betrayal," he said. I didn't argue. Didn't plead. I gathered my things, my notebook, my bag, my half-eaten granola bar, and walked out. Kendra's smirk followed me like a shadow. Nobody said a word, nobody asked if it was true. They just watched me go, another disposable cog in their machine. Outside, in the back seat of my beat-up Toyota Corolla, I checked my phone. Another text from Victoria. "Still want to wait?" "Yes," I typed. "Let's see what they break first." For 2 weeks, I vanished. Not from the world, but from theirs. While Andrew and Kendra pranced through boardrooms, spinning lies about my betrayal to the press, I watched from a penthouse in the Gold Coast, a place I'd bought years ago under a shell company. It was my sanctuary, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, with a view of Lake Michigan that made the city feel alive. I sipped coffee from a chipped mug, the same one I used in my analyst days, and tracked their every move. Jared Weiss, my accountant, was my eyes and ears. He uncovered $1.9 million in misallocated consulting fees, funneled to shell firms tied to Kendra's cousin, Sloppy. Victoria's team traced forged documents, used to justify my firing, straight to Kendra's login credentials. Desperate. Andrew, meanwhile, was unraveling. Without me feeding him ideas, he floundered, his boardroom performances falling flat. The Horizon initiative stalled, budgets bled, and whispers of panic spread through the company like wildfire. Then came the divorce papers. They arrived in a crisp courier envelope, Andrew's signature scrawled across a letter that pretended to be remorseful but screamed relief. Irreconcilable differences, it said. Ethical misconduct. The irony made my throat burn. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I slid the papers into my desk drawer, next to my father's old fountain pen, and let them sit like a loaded gun. Victoria started building my counterclaim. Fraud, embezzlement, marital misconduct, abuse of power. We weren't just going to win. We were going to leave them with nothing but shame and legal bills. By the time I scheduled the emergency board meeting, everything was ready. The night before, I didn't sleep. I stood on my balcony, the city's lights flickering like a heartbeat. I thought about my father, his calloused hands, his late nights building Summit Edge from a tiny office in Pilsen. He'd trusted Andrew, believed in him. And Andrew had sold that trust for a corner office and a mistress who smelled like ambition. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. That morning, I didn't wear my thrift store disguise. No elastic hair tie, no faded cardigan. I stepped into a navy Chanel skirt suit that cost more than Andrew's Porsche lease. My heels were Italian leather, my hair swept into a sleek chignon. I didn't do it for vanity. I did it to remind them who I was when I stopped pretending to be small. I walked into Summit Edge's lobby at 9:55 a.m. The receptionist, the same one who'd watched security escort me out, went pale. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I nodded once and kept moving, my heels echoing like gunshots on the marble floor. The boardroom was a glass cage on the 42nd floor, all sleek wood and Chicago skyline. Andrew sat at the head of the table, his tie perfect, his smile practiced. Kendra was beside him, radiant in a cream blazer, her eyes scanning her phone. The board, 10 men and women in tailored suits, sipped coffee and shuffled papers. Nobody noticed me until I set my black binder down with a deliberate thud. Kendra's head snapped up. Her face cycled through confusion, disbelief, then fear. Andrew's smile froze. I raised a hand. Not angry, not pleading, just calm. The room went quiet. Victoria entered behind me, pushing a cart stacked with labeled folders. She stood at my side, her face unreadable. I took a breath and began. "My name is Isabel Green," I said, "majority shareholder and acting chair of Summit Edge Ventures." Silence. Then a cough. A board member blinked like he'd seen a ghost. Another choked on his coffee. Andrew's hands gripped the table. Kendra tried to laugh, but it came out like a hiccup. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I opened my binder and laid out the truth. Emails, bank records, internal memos. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every forged signature. I showed them the $1.9 million Kendra funneled to her cousin's shell firms, the documents she'd doctored to frame me, the offshore accounts Andrew thought nobody would find. Each slide of my presentation was a nail in their coffin, hammered with precision. When I revealed the forged files used to fire me, a murmur rippled through the room. Kendra's face was ashen. Andrew's hands shook so badly his pen rolled off the table. I handed out my final folder, my divorce countersuit. It detailed every indiscretion: company-funded vacations, secret deposits, lies to investors. The board read in stunned silence. I looked at them, my voice steady. This company was built on integrity. If we want it to survive, we clean house, starting now. Nobody argued, nobody defended them. The vote was unanimous. Andrew and Kendra were terminated, effective immediately. Security arrived. Andrew didn't speak. His eyes were glassy, his jaw slack. Kendra's mascara streaked as she sobbed, her heels dragging as they escorted her out. I stood unmoving as the room emptied. Then it was just me, Victoria, and the skyline. I walked to the window, the city pulsing below. The air felt cleaner, like a storm had passed. That was the beginning. Over the next weeks, I didn't just fix Summit Edge, I reborn it. The Horizon Initiative rolled out under my name, my vision. We slashed 30% of administrative waste, fired the toxic managers, and replaced outdated systems with ones that actually worked. Meetings became sharp, collaborative, alive. Analysts who'd once cowered now pitched ideas with fire in their eyes. Departments that hadn't spoken in years started sharing coffee and strategies. The company breathed again. 6 months later, revenue was up 12%. New investors knocked, drawn not just by numbers, but by a culture that felt human again. I hired people who believed in the work, not the paycheck. I promoted those who'd been overlooked, their talent buried under old hierarchies. Every policy, every decision echoed the values my father had carved into this company's bones. I didn't take the top floor office. I stayed in my analyst cubicle, now with a window overlooking the Chicago River. It wasn't just symbolic, it kept me grounded. I still brought my lunch sometimes, ate at my desk while interns stole glances, unsure if I was a boss or a myth. I liked it that way. Leadership isn't about thrones, it's about showing up, sleeves rolled, ready to build. Andrew and Kendra? They faded into obscurity, their names tied to headlines about fraud and indictments. The investigations were slow but relentless. Their reputations, once polished by PR firms, crumbled into case studies for business schools. I didn't follow their downfall. I didn't need to. Revenge was never my goal, accountability was. Standing in the same building where I'd been humiliated, I felt the walls shift. Not because they'd changed, but because I had. I'd learned how power isolates, how silence shields the corrupt, how truth can be buried under memos and egos. But I'd also learned that resilience is louder than fear, that authenticity endures, that leadership is quiet until it's needed, then it's a force. People still ask how I stayed calm, how I didn't burn it all down when they tried to erase me. But I didn't need fire. The truth was enough. And that old Toyota Corolla, it's still mine. Parked in the executive lot, wedged between Teslas and Audis. People ask why I keep it, I just smile. It reminds me of a time when the world thought I was small. And it reminds me that being underestimated isn't a flaw, it's a blade, honed sharp. I've learned to wield it well.